I've never felt so humiliated in my life as I did when my sister Clara slapped me across the face in front of 200 people at her wedding. My cheek burned, not just from the sting of her hand, but from the weight of every single pair of eyes staring at me. Some shocked, some whispering, some laughing under their breath. I stood there, frozen, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. All because I wouldn't give her my penthouse, my home. The one thing I'd worked my entire life to build. And the worst part? I didn't see it coming. Not from her. Not from the sister I'd practically raised. Let me back up. My name's Ethan Caldwell, and I'm 34 years old. I grew up in a small, crumbling apartment in South Philly with Clara and our mom. Dad left when I was 6, Clara was 4, and Mom, well, she tried, but she was always working double shifts at the diner just to keep the lights on. That left me to look after Clara most of the time. I was the one making her peanut butter sandwiches when she was hungry, helping her with her math homework, walking her to school so the neighborhood kids wouldn't mess with her. I wasn't perfect. God knows I wasn't. But I did my best to be the big brother she needed. Clara was my shadow, you know. This tiny, bright-eyed kid with a laugh that could light up a room. She'd follow me everywhere, tugging at my sleeve, asking a million questions. Ethan, why do birds fly south? Ethan, can we get ice cream? Ethan, are you going to be famous one day? I'd roll my eyes, but I loved it. I loved her. By the time I was 18, I was working construction to help Mom with the bills. Clara was 16, starting to get into trouble, skipping school, hanging out with the wrong crowd. I tried to keep her in line, but she'd just laugh it off, call me Mr. Serious. I didn't have time to be a kid myself, so I guess I was a little hard on her. But I was scared for her. Scared she'd end up like some of the people we grew up around, stuck in a cycle, going nowhere. I wanted more for her, for both of us. Fast forward a bit, I got a scholarship to a community college, studied business at night while working full-time. It was brutal. 12-hour days, then classes, then studying until 2 a.m. But I had this fire in me. I wanted to make something of myself, to prove I wasn't just some kid from a broken home. Clara, though, she was different. She dropped out of high school, started waitressing, and got caught up in this flashy lifestyle, partying, dating guys who drove nice cars but treated her like garbage. I'd try to talk to her, but she'd brush me off. "You're not my dad, Ethan," she'd snap. And yeah, I wasn't. But I was the one who'd been there when she cried herself to sleep after Dad left. I was the one who'd fought off her creepy ex-boyfriend when he showed up at our apartment drunk. I was the one who cared. By the time I was 28, I'd clawed my way up. I started a small logistics company. Nothing fancy, just coordinating deliveries for local businesses. But I was good at it. I worked 80-hour weeks, saved every penny, and reinvested it into the business. 4 years later, I had a team, a proper office, and enough money to buy my dream place. A penthouse in Center City. It wasn't some billionaire's mansion, just a 2-bedroom with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the Schuylkill River. But to me, it was everything. It was proof I'd made it out. I'd walk into that place after a long day, look out at the city lights, and feel proud. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was enough. Clara, though, she was still drifting. She'd moved in with her boyfriend, Derek, this slick real estate guy who always seemed a little too perfect. You know the type. Gelled hair, tailored suits, always talking about big deals but never quite closing them. I didn't trust him, but Clara was head over heels. She'd call me every few months, usually when things went south with Derek or she needed money. I'd help her out, pay her phone bill, cover her rent once or twice. I didn't mind. She was my sister, but it stung when she'd disappear again, only texting me when she needed something. Then about a year ago, Clara called me out of the blue, her voice all bubbly. "Ethan, I'm engaged," she said. I could hear the smile in her voice, and for the first time in years, she sounded like the little girl who used to follow me around. Derek had proposed, and she was over the moon. I was happy for her, cautiously happy because, well, Derek. But I wanted to believe this was her chance to turn things around. She asked me to come to dinner to celebrate. And I did. It was awkward. Derek kept talking about his investments, and Clara kept gushing about how perfect he was. But I smiled, raised a glass, and told her I was proud of her. I meant it. The wedding planning started almost immediately, and Clara threw herself into it like it was her full-time job. She wanted everything to be perfect. Designer dress, fancy venue, live band, the works. I offered to help with the costs, even though my business was going through a rough patch. We'd lost a big client, and I was dipping into my savings to keep things afloat. But I didn't tell Clara that. I didn't want to stress her out. I gave her $10,000 for the wedding, which was a stretch for me, but I figured it was worth it to see her happy. Then, about 3 months before the wedding, Clara called me again. This time, her voice was different, sharp, almost demanding. "Ethan, I need to talk to you about something important," she said. I met her at a coffee shop, and she didn't waste any time. "Derek and I want to start our life together in style," she said, leaning across the table, her eyes intense. "We need a place that reflects who we're going to be. Your penthouse? It's perfect. We want to live there." I blinked, caught off guard. "My penthouse?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Clara, that's my home. I worked my whole life for that place." She waved her hand like it was no big deal. I know, but you're doing so well, Ethan. You could get another place, right? Derek and I, we need this. It's our fresh start." I tried to explain that it wasn't just about money. That penthouse was my sanctuary, my proof that I'd overcome everything we'd been through. But Clara wasn't listening. She kept talking about how perfect it would be for her and Derek, how it would set the tone for their marriage. I told her I'd think about it, but deep down, I knew I couldn't give it up. Not for her, not for anyone. The calls kept coming after that. Every few days, Clara would text or call, pushing harder each time. "Ethan, you're being selfish," she'd say. "You've got everything, and I've got nothing. You owe me this." That one hurt. Owe her? I'd given her everything I could, my time, my money, my support. But it was never enough. Derek started chiming in too, leaving voicemails about how family helps family, and how I was holding Clara back. It got to the point where I'd see their names pop up on my phone and feel this knot in my stomach. I started avoiding their calls, hoping they'd drop it. They didn't. The week before the wedding, Clara showed up at my penthouse unannounced. I let her in, thinking she just wanted to talk, but she was furious. "You're ruining my life, Ethan," she yelled, pacing my living room. "You're sitting here in your fancy apartment while I'm struggling, and you won't even help me? What kind of brother are you?" I tried to stay calm, but I was shaking. I told her I loved her, but I couldn't give up my home. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I thought that was the end of it. I thought she'd cool off, and we'd work it out after the wedding. I was wrong. The wedding day came, and I put on my best suit, forced a smile, and drove to the venue, a gorgeous old mansion just outside Philly. I was nervous, not because of the crowd, but because things with Clara had been so tense. I hadn't seen her since our fight, and I just wanted to get through the day without drama. I walked into the reception hall, greeted a few relatives, and took my seat near the front. The ceremony was beautiful. Clara looked like a princess in her white dress, and Derek, for once, seemed genuinely happy. I clapped along with everyone else, trying to focus on the moment. Maybe this was a new beginning for all of us. The reception was in full swing, music blasting, people dancing, champagne flowing. I was at the bar, sipping a drink, when Clara walked up to me. Her face was tight, her eyes glinting with something I couldn't quite read. "Can we talk?" she said, her voice low. I nodded, thinking she wanted to clear the air. She led me to the center of the room, where people were mingling and laughing. I thought it was weird, but I followed her anyway. "Ethan," she said, loud enough for people nearby to hear, "I need you to say it. Right now. In front of everyone. Are you giving us the penthouse or not?" My stomach dropped. The room seemed to tilt. People turned to look at us, their conversations trailing off. I could feel the heat creeping up my neck. "Clara, this isn't the place," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. "Let's talk later, okay?" "No," she snapped, her voice rising. "I'm done waiting. You've been dodging me for weeks. Tell me right now, are you giving us the penthouse?" I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Clara, I love you, but I can't give you my home. I've already helped with the wedding, with everything else. I need my place. You know what it means to me." Her face twisted, and before I could react, her hand flew up and cracked across my cheek. The sound echoed, sharp and ugly, cutting through the music. The room went silent. I stood there, stunned, my face burning, my ears ringing. 200 people were staring at us, family, friends, strangers. I saw my mom's face in the crowd, pale and horrified. Derek was smirking, leaning against a table like he was watching a show. Clara's eyes were blazing, her chest heaving. "You're a selfish bastard," she hissed. "You've always thought you're better than me." I wanted to disappear. I wanted to run, to scream, to undo the last 5 minutes, but I couldn't move. My legs felt like lead. I just stood there, the sting of her slap fading into this deep, hollow ache in my chest. I don't know how long I stood there, maybe 10 seconds, maybe a minute. It felt like forever. Finally, I turned and walked out, my head down, avoiding every single pair of eyes burning into me. I drove home in a daze, my hands shaking on the wheel. When I got to my penthouse, I sat on the couch, staring out at the city lights, and cried. I hadn't cried in years, not since Dad left. But that night, I let it all out. The hurt, the betrayal, the shame. I kept replaying Clara's words, the look on her face, the sound of her hand hitting me. I kept thinking about all the times I'd been there for her, all the sacrifices I'd made, and for what? To be humiliated in front of everyone I knew? The next few days were a blur. I didn't answer my phone, didn't check my emails. I just went through the motions, work, home, sleep. My mom called, left voicemails saying Clara was sorry and didn't mean it, but I couldn't bring myself to call back. I was too raw, too broken. I started wondering if I was the selfish one. Maybe I should have given her the penthouse. Maybe I was holding on to it too tightly. But every time I thought about letting it go, I felt this panic, like I'd be giving up the one thing that made me feel like I'd succeeded. About a week later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from a law firm, and my heart sank when I saw Clara's name on it. She was suing me, for emotional distress and breach of familial duty. Apparently, Derek had convinced her that because I'd helped raise her, I owed her a share of my assets, namely, the penthouse. I couldn't believe it. My own sister, dragging me to court over a home I'd worked my ass off to buy. I hired a lawyer, a guy named Tom who'd been recommended by a friend. He was blunt, no nonsense, and told me the case was flimsy, but could still be a headache. "Family disputes are the worst," he said. "They get messy." The court date was set for a month later, and I spent that time in a fog of anxiety. I couldn't sleep, could barely eat. My business was still struggling, and now I had legal fees piling up. I kept picturing Clara in court, her face twisted with anger, calling me selfish again. I kept hearing the slap, feeling the eyes on me. I started doubting myself, wondering if I'd been wrong to say no. But every time I looked around my penthouse, my home, I knew I couldn't let it go. It wasn't just a place. It was my life, my proof that I'd made it through the chaos of our childhood. The day of the hearing, I walked into the courthouse feeling like I was going to throw up. Clara was there with Derek, looking smug as ever. She wouldn't meet my eyes. The courtroom was small, nothing like the dramatic ones you see on TV. Just a few rows of seats, a judge's bench, and a clerk typing away. My lawyer, Tom, patted my shoulder and told me to stay calm. "You've got this," he said. I didn't believe him. Clara's lawyer went first, spinning this ridiculous story about how I'd abandoned her emotionally and financially, how my refusal to give her the penthouse was cruel and vindictive. I sat there, my jaw clenched, listening to this stranger twist my life into something ugly. When it was my turn, Tom laid out the facts. The penthouse was mine, bought with my money, and I had no legal obligation to give it to anyone. I'd already given Clara thousands for the wedding, supported her for years. He called it what it was, a money grab. Then something happened that I didn't expect. The judge, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, leaned forward. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, looking at me, "I'd like to hear from you directly. Why is this penthouse so important to you?" I froze. I hadn't prepared for this. Tom nodded at me, urging me to speak. So I did. I told her everything. How I'd grown up taking care of Clara, how I'd worked my way through college, how I'd built my business from nothing. I told her about the penthouse, how it was more than just a place to live. It was my proof that I wasn't defined by where I came from. My voice cracked as I talked about the wedding, the slap, the humiliation. I didn't look at Clara, but I could feel her staring at me. When I finished, the courtroom was quiet. The judge nodded, her face unreadable, and said, "Thank you, Mr. Caldwell." Then she turned to Clara. "Ms. Caldwell," she said, her voice firm, "I was at your wedding. I saw what happened." My heart stopped. Clara's face went pale. Derek shifted in his seat, looking like he wanted to bolt. The judge went on. "I was a guest of your caterer, a friend of mine. I saw your brother standing there, trying to keep the peace. I saw you strike him in front of everyone, and I saw the look on his face." She paused, letting the words sink in. "I've heard enough today to know that this lawsuit is not about justice. It's about entitlement. You have no legal claim to your brother's property, and your behavior, both at the wedding and in bringing this case, shows a profound lack of gratitude for everything he's done for you." Clara started crying, but the judge wasn't done. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, turning back to me, "I'm dismissing this case, but more than that, I want you to know something. You've built a life you should be proud of. Don't let anyone, family or otherwise, make you feel like you owe them your success." The gavel came down, and that was it. Case dismissed. I sat there, stunned, as Clara and Derek hurried out of the courtroom. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt empty. My lawyer clapped me on the back, but I barely heard him. All I could think about was Clara's face, the way she'd looked at me like I was a stranger. The next few weeks were quiet. I went back to work, tried to focus on rebuilding my business. My mom called, apologized again for Clara, but I told her I didn't want to talk about it. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired. I started seeing a therapist, something I'd never thought I'd do. She helped me unpack the guilt, the hurt, the weight of always being the responsible one. I started to realize that I'd spent my whole life trying to save Clara, but I couldn't save someone who didn't want to be saved. Then one night, about 2 months after the hearing, I got a letter. It was from Clara, handwritten, which was rare for her. My hands shook as I opened it. She wrote that she was sorry, not just for the slap, but for everything. She said Derek had been pushing her to go after the penthouse, filling her head with ideas about how they deserved it. She said she'd been jealous of me, of how I'd always seemed to have it together when she felt like a mess. She said she'd left Derek, that she was starting over, trying to figure out who she was without him. She didn't ask for forgiveness, just said she hoped one day we could talk again. I sat there, reading the letter over and over, tears streaming down my face. I wanted to call her, to tell her I still loved her, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer, promising myself I'd reach out when the time was right. That night I stood at my penthouse windows looking out at the city. The lights sparkled like they always did, but for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything. Not to Clara, not to anyone. I'd spent so long carrying the weight of our past, trying to be the perfect brother, the perfect son, the perfect success story. But the judge's words kept echoing in my head. You've built a life you should be proud of. And for the first time, I believed it. I don't know what the future holds for me and Clara. Maybe we'll rebuild, maybe we won't. But I've learned something through all of this. You can love someone with your whole heart, give them everything you've got, and still have to draw a line. Because at the end of the day, the only person you can truly save is yourself. And I'm finally starting to figure out how to do that.